While nearly 80% of mobile traffic is generated indoors, it's estimated that only 2% of commercial properties are equipped with an in-building mobile network infrastructure. Building owners and property managers know that connectivity is something that their tenants need, but understanding how to best finance capital-intensive in-building wireless networks and what carriers to host can leave property professionals scrambling for answers. Here in the NMG studio, right here in Barcelona, Spain, are leaders in the connectivity space that can tell us how to bridge the gap for a myriad of smart building solutions. Next to me is Jarrett Wendt. He's Executive Vice President of City Now at Panasonic. Next to Jarrett is Ken Sandfeld. He's President of Solid Americas. And gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. Jarrett, I want to start with you. We had a bit of a pre-panel conference. You said something that kind of stuck out to me as something that I wanted to mention. You said the real estate industry is stuck in 1966. Is there an inflection point that we've experienced already, that we will experience, where we're more in this smart community space?
I don't know if we're at that inflection moment, and that 66 might be a slight exaggeration, but it's certainly stuck in a business model that is rinse and repeat. And what that disallows is kind of forward-thinking development sites that bring multitudes of connectivity, of multimodal options, of live, work, play. And so we're seeing a transition, but I think that there's certainly an old garden established way of doing things, and I think that there's a potential disruptive nature if we can get into these development sites and kind of show the ROI on disrupting kind of business as usual. But it's certainly an antiquated industry at this point.
And certainly the building owners, the real estate community is looking for answers, right? The customers, the tenants are demanding, certain services to be enhanced. Anything related to internet,
yep.
They want their
yep.
service, right? And they want to get it the way they want to get it. They don't want to be told how they're going to get that information to them. So the technology is shifting, and I think the business models in the real estate community are shifting, to be able to monetize the amenities that you get with your lease and whatnot. So
I think to your point, I think that traditionally this technology pillar is not part of their equation.
No.
So they don't think of that necessarily from a build site perspective or a development opportunity. And so we're literally injecting another pillar for them to consider. And at least, over the last 15 to 20 years, as we've kind of had some historical prowess with Fujisawa and Tsunoshima, things that we control, we can inject that pillar a lot easier. But when we kind of replicate that model to kind of high-end developers, they're almost intimidated by the technology pillar. Right. So I think it's hard to kind of put a value equation on something you don't understand. So we've had a heavy degree of education on what's available, how things are interoperable, what an open API platform looks like, right. How you can unlock different technologies, and the value that could potentially bring to a resident. The end result is that when you're looking at a piece of paper and the end resident, you need to charge more for that square foot. I don't know if that pillar has been injected long enough or fluently enough for them to say, I get it.
Exactly. Well, look, a real estate owner, a building owner, I call them building owners, they want an ROI on
yep.
anything that they invest in their buildings,
100%.
right? And the way they're going to get that is through more applications, right? So, providing high-speed data service for streaming internet to the tenants is one thing. IoT, other sensors and
yes.
things in the building, everything smart, if you will. All those things require infrastructure as well. So to the extent that you're going to be investing in infrastructure,
yep.
the more that you can create an ROI model around all those services, the better, including license bands, cellular yes. services,
yes.
Whether it's CBRS, 5G, 4G,
yes.
Wi-Fi, all those things all are in the ROI equation and the applications that go with it. And that's something that the building owners haven't really had. It's never been standardized. It's never gotten to this point
totally agree.
Where it is now.
And part of the business model approach, at least from Panasonic's perspective, is that we have dedicated resources that are sitting down at the table and kind of doing that education arm. So building that technology pillar and creating the fluency within large companies that are developers across the United States, so that they do have now dedicated resources within their own teams right. that understand that landscape. So that's at least right where we stand right now in the snapshot. 66 might have been a little hardcore. 68. 68.
So clearly a value prop in sustainable smart buildings, right? You have these large venues, football stadiums, value prop there. You have the consumer using the internet in a residential building, value prop there. But you certainly have a cross section right in the middle that you folks over at Solid call the Middleprise, where there's a massive value prop there that maybe is not getting as much attention. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention now because it's not solved, right? And when we say it's not solved, there is no solutions and business models that have been able to essentially crack that portion of the business. And the reason is the solutions are either too high powered or powerful to be able to cover the smaller buildings, or they're too small in order to cover the bigger buildings. So you have a technology situation that there hasn't been a solution to be able to match that. And you haven't had the business models to be able to match it. And so that has been an underserved portion of the market, and it's a huge portion of the market. And we're actually at that point now where that's going to change, and that's exciting.
We wholeheartedly agree. I think the bookends are covered. The middle zone, at least on the high end, let's talk stadiums and let's talk economics. I mean, the dirty little secret is those are all sponsorship gigs. And so it's less about the disruptive technology or the impact of technology and more about the checks that are being written for your brand in those environments. They're high prize, high optics, but the economic ROI that you'd have to hit in this middle section is different, right? Because nobody's paying for that other than the actual end user. The bottom end, maybe it's an easier entry point, and it's a large market, but this middle section, to us in our estimation, to add what you were saying, is that there's not necessarily a ubiquitous platform that can plug in all of these disparate resources and applications, and that's what we've ran into challenges in those kind of large building areas, those dense markets, because there's just so many players and not a platform that everybody can play on and agree to. So the world is shifting out of singular platform, you operate on a brand platform, to an open platform. And I don't know if there's been a standard established in that environment, hence creating the confusion when you are a building owner in a dense market. What do you choose? What do you select? Because you're getting hit at by people that singularly isolate you on a single platform that disallow multiple applications, open platforms, et cetera. So,
and that's right. I mean, so Solid being a major DAS player, we've been focusing on the DAS business for 20 years, and DAS till recently has been pretty much a piece of coax cable and some fiber and other electronics. The trouble is that's not something a building owner can monetize.
Nope.
Right? They're going to be like, what do I do with that? You can't do nothing. So it has to move to a structured cabling solution. It has to fit in with all the other solutions that have to go into the building so that it can have an ROI.
Yep.
The other thing that is, once you solve the infrastructure problem of how does it look inside the building, how does it make sense so that it's not just affordable, so that it pencils out, right? Because it's not a stadium, right? There's no one writing a check
paying
for
the check,
it, right? So they have to want to invest in this, and having it fit in with their other investments that they're making makes perfect sense. So they're deploying new fiber, they're deploying new cat cables, and they're building a new Wi-Fi network. They're building all kinds of cameras and all kinds of things in the building, right? And so they need to be able to continue to grow upon that, and that's really what's happening. But once you get the infrastructure done, then becomes, what are you going to connect to it, right? And that's where it gets really exciting. It starts getting
Wholeheartedly
smart
agree.
city, smart building, and that's where it's going crazy.
And the elephant in the room, sustainability. All of these applications unlock massive sustainability initiatives. So baseline building reporting, we're helping to establish those baselines so that it's not just the volunteers that are performing, but everybody's required to actually, to compete on that level. These applications that are unlocked with the ecosystem you just talked about directly affect sustainability. So that's the world that we're moving towards.
I think with that said, though, you have a real estate building owner, even a very large real estate building owner. Is that necessarily, it might be a value prop to Panasonic or to Solid, but you're talking to somebody who's been around for a while. Is that something of priority importance to them if you were to lead with the sustainability?
I would say, it depends on the developer. To be honest, I mean, obviously it always depends is the answer to everything. But the ones that we're selecting to work with are high level, high impact, high development sites, and they are interested in it. They understand, and I have numbers that are ingrained in my head. But Fujisawa, as an example, 70% reduction in CO2, 30% reduction in water usage, 30% energy back to the grid using solar and microgrid battery storage technology. and a 25% home value increase juxtaposed to the house across the street outside this community. That last one is the one that matters, because if you're a building owner, developer of consequence, and you hear the demand for sustainability, you see that maybe municipalities are moving in that direction and establishing baseline expectations for buildings and how they report, why they report, what measures are taken to make sure that they're having some sustainability, path towards sustainability. I feel like the developers of consequence that are paying attention to these numbers are now looking at that 25% home value increase. It's far more attractive, but to Ken's point, it's not just sustainability. It's attractive when you have an ecosystem that allows a free flow of information, if you're able to downstream, upstream with wicked speeds, if you feel like you've walked into something that supports your lifestyle and you are in that kind of, millennial plus area. Those are the things that are important to you. I promise you developers are paying attention to that ROI right now.
They all, absolutely all are. And what they're looking for, though, is they're looking for the momentum to go. No one wants to be the first person to invest a lot of money in their infrastructure and then not have a payoff.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of that over the years, right? This wireless mesh thing
Sure.
and this thing, and then they deploy it, and then, that's not the standard anymore.
Right.
Right? That can't happen anymore.
No, you're right.
We're never going to get building owners to, real estate owners to invest in their properties if whatever they're putting in is non-standard and it goes away in a few
And a
years.
snapshot in time, right?
Exactly,
Yep.
right? So, and I think that's different now. We're talking about standards. We're talking about whether it be the IoT standards,
Yes.
the cellular standards,
Yes.
the standards for virtualized RAN networks that are all standards based from an interface standpoint,
Yes.
so that we can connect to this core networks with the carriers. All those things all blend into that
Yes.
to be able to makes dollars and cents for the building owner. And as far as whether they will do it or not, they're going to determine that on their own. They're going, like you said, they're going to see the real estate values that are going to decline because this new generation of people that are going to either rent the building or buy into it, they're going to demand those things happen.
That's right.
They're just going to demand it. Just like they don't care about a coax cable for their television anymore because they're streaming everything.
That's right.
Right? And I can go on and on with the analogies about what this new generation of people
Yep.
that are going to pay more are willing to do. And whether it's commercial real estate or residential, it doesn't matter. It's the same application.
That's exactly right.
I want to ask you, Ken, about public safety, in-building public safety as well, and leveraging network infrastructure through DAS as an example for public safety, and where we are sort of on the timeline of that. Is that something, again, a value prop to you, but is that being translated to these building owners?
Speaking of North America, for the most part, I mean, public safety, first responder services are paramount. Safety is the most important thing in a building, bar none. If you can't stream your YouTube, well, that's fine. Maybe you deal with it. But if the building's not safe, and that includes being able to dial 911. Everyone always thinks of first responder,
Yep.
The police or the fire coming. Actually, think of the fire department, but the police need to be able to communicate as well. The answer is, just like everything else, the goal is to make it so that same infrastructure that has an ROI for the building owner is going to be added to the building to allow first responder, to allow any type of signal that is safety related to be done on a very economic level. And it's another service. It's actually, we want a building owner to do it because it's the right thing to do, not because they're required to do it. And now we're not quite there yet, right? If you're going to deploy it just for that, now you have an ROI problem.
Yep.
Right? So that's why we're trying to. It all has to become one infrastructure. Anything that's wireless, anything that's mobility.
Yep.
I love the word mobility because that's where we are nowadays. Right? We don't want to be tethered to anything. I mean, the cables are there to build an infrastructure, but they're not there to tether the user because no one stays put. No one wants a desk phone anymore. No one wants.
No.
Even the fire department doesn't. In a high rise, they don't want to plug into the wall. They want to be able to run to the building and be able to communicate and save people's lives, right?
Yep.
And the same with the police. So plugging in or being part of that network is not going to work anymore.
Jerry, you talked earlier again in our pre-panel conference about multi-carrier connectivity. From Panasonic's perspective, what's the importance of that? And again, where are you on the timeline of that being received?
The easy answer is it's critical. Again, going back to our kind of holistic thought processes is that this is going to be an open system, and we talked about a blend matrix of the ecosystem, what that unlocks. If you're locked into a certain carrier system, it limits the choices, and I believe the world of limited choices has come and gone. We are in a world where we want multiple carriers, multiple choices. So at Peña Station Next, as an example, those 400 acres have every carrier. We have multiple Wi-Fi supply chains. We have multiple access points. We have a connected mobility and connected vehicle platform that's executing on multiple carrier platforms. It is the way of the world. There's no doubt about it.
You just mentioned Penn Station, just for the audience so they can get a sense of what that's all about. Can you just give us a little background on that project?
Yeah, certainly. So born out of, again, I mentioned earlier some of the historical wins that we've had with building kind of smart, sustainable towns from scratch on maybe defunct refrigeration factories in Japan. The challenge was creating a business model that we could replicate out of the Japanese islands. If you go to Japan wearing a Panasonic hat, I can only liken it to Kenote Masahisa, the founder, is Steve Jobs of his generation, and he means that much to those islands. So picking up a phone for stakeholder alignment to build something like Fujisawa or Tsunoshima happens with great alacrity. Outside of that, the challenge was nobody cares. I mean, we like to think we're Panasonic, we turned 100 years old, but you pick up the phone in North America, it doesn't have the same connotation. So part of this process was replicating the stakeholder alignment that it takes to come to the table on a 10-year build site. So that was replicated most easy in Denver. The land developer, Follenwider, is I believe holds landowner license number 1 and real estate license number 1 in the state of Colorado. This 400 acres was a combination of city and county of Denver land, Denver airport land, and Follenwider land, and now Panasonic as a minority investor. The idea was Fujisawa was 40 acres, this is 400, it's 10 times the size. It's been anointed as the official technology arm as the city and county of Denver. So anything that is tested and deployed and implemented in Peña Station Next is for eventual deployment into the city and the state. That was the hook. So stakeholder alignment, check. Unbelievable stakeholder alignment in the state of Colorado, the 400-acre ecosystem as an extension of the city and county of Denver, so we can throw technology with far greater alacrity than you can in a traditional municipality. You can test, vet, produce handbooks how you install safe and smart streetlights, the first in Colorado history, the first microgrid approved by the Public Utility Commission, the first carbon neutral district plan, the first connected vehicle platform, the first autonomous shuttle connecting a bus to a train in U.S. history on a city street. All of these things are happening in this ecosystem because of the stakeholder alignment, but because of them leaning forward and speaking of those developers, they're all in. So this is unlike anything that they've built in the last 150 years of that family's history. So speaking of developers that are leaning forward.
Ken, I'm going to round out this conversation by asking you a question about, and this is part of the introduction to this segment, about commercial real estate owners investing and being part of the financing for in-building connectivity. I know that Solid has come across a number of best practices over the years. Can you share some of those with us? Sure.
Well, clearly, enterprises, building owners, commercial real estate providers are going to have to invest in their own infrastructure. That's for sure. Wireless operators, service providers are not going to be funding and paying for their entire infrastructure, and nor should they have to in the future, because the infrastructure will be multi-purpose backbone for wireless mobility anyways. But once you have the technology part solved, and then it comes down to the leasing models and how you monetize that to the tenants and the people who buy the real estate. And that's really what they're working on right now. And from a best practice standpoint, the ones that are doing the best at that are truly marketing that capability, right? Where the challenge has been is not just purchasing the infrastructure and building the model, it's getting a guarantee. We talked about multi-operator just a second ago. I really think multi-operator is not the word, it's all operators. Because how can you predict who's going to be in that building? It just doesn't make any sense, If there's, if we have 4 operators, then all 4 operators need to be in that building, and that is what the tenants we're going to look for. That's what's going to give you the easiest way to monetize it, and it's what makes most sense, to a building owner who's going to, if they're going to buy something and pay for that infrastructure, well, then they should be able to have all the services.
And not only that, if you're creating value in a development and you're trying to attract potential buyers or leasers, you can't predict, like you said, what carrier they're going to have. Exactly. So if you're able to advertise, come one, come all, we've got everyone. That's right. Including the ones we don't know, because we're prepared for that. That's right. You start to separate yourself from the pack. So I think that the ones that are on the curve are learning very fast that this is the way that you attract a different type of buyer or leaser.
That's right.
I always ask this question to our panelists, sort of the futurist question. Jarrett and both you and Ken as well touched on this a little bit in the dialogue, but as far as connected and sustainable smart buildings, and Jarrett, I'll start with you. If we were here this time next year, what would we be talking about? Further education?
For me, it would be the further fluency of the developer sets that we've, speaking from our perspective, the developer sets that we've chosen to work with and partner with, having an increased fluency on how to deploy that technology pillar. I would like to think that we're a year down the path, and Peña Station next will be in its 3rd year, and I'd like to think we're down the path of producing the type of valuable data on the ROI that we've spoke to in this entire time, is that we're still in the world of the promise of tomorrow versus the tangibility of looking at data that says I used to be able to charge X per square foot and now I can charge Y, and I know that this technology pillar, which I'm increasingly fluent with, had a direct causal effect on that. I think I would absolutely be able to say that we've had some wins in analyzing the A plus B equals C. And I think from a very, almost anecdotal or IoT perspective, Ken mentioned it earlier, but there's such tremendous force in technology that's happening right now, and in the LED lights in the studio. We're going to be in a world where those are going to be embedded with sensor technology. They will track assets, so if you don't want to lose a camera, you can keep eyes on that camera. Humans, you mentioned emergency response. We will live in a world where they will literally have on their devices, they're rolling up to a building that's potentially on fire, knowing exactly how many humans are in that. Wirelessly, you'll be able to walk into rooms without the regular control mechanisms. You can do that on your iPhone or whatever it is. We are moving so rapidly towards that direction, and I think the really exciting part of that is that education and fluency on the developer side makes this far more ubiquitous in the coming years, which is awesome. But the causal effect that at least we're interested in is that safety and security. That's just part of who we are in our DNA. And imagining that world that is coming very quickly where you have connected and autonomous vehicles, which is going to dramatically affect life. Right. When you have a kind of emergency response system that is connected, it doesn't matter what the operator, it doesn't matter what the platform is, but they can go into that building and know exactly where every human is. That's the world that we're going, and that's exciting from a futurist perspective, which is just knocking on our door.
That's right. I think we're here at Mobile World Congress this week. Might as well talk about some of the hotbeds. The buildings are going to be going from 4G to 5G and beyond. And so you talk about what's exciting. What's exciting is how all of those technologies are going to help make all these things happen, right? 5G is becoming more in focus. It's very exciting. At this point, when we talk about inside the building, we're talking about super hotspots, right? And super hotspots meaning that my phone works everywhere, but when I go to a super hotspot area, I go from, let's just call it, half a gig service or 1 gig service to tens of gig services. And what can you do with that? Your latencies go down. It skyrockets the amount of applications that you can do. It's just a total game changer. And when the real estate community starts seeing that the game-changing applications, what they can do for the value of their real estate, it's going to be lights out. It's just getting to that point and getting the momentum. The things that are going to be the tipping point, really, I think, are going to be the virtualization of a lot of the RAN networks, the openness of the RAN networks, so that there's newer platforms for all these things to play on. Right now, it's a very closed ecosystem, and it's going to take a few years still for that to all kind of shake loose. But I believe 5G is going to be the impetus for that. Case in point, the Olympics in Korea that we just saw, 5G was showcased. Sol deployed a lot of the optical networks over there for that. Yep. Very ultra low latency applications with obviously extreme speeds. But it's really more about the latency than anything else, right? It's not just about streaming, but you start getting into a lot of the VR stuff where all those applications have real world application in facilities. So it's going to be quite exciting. Agreed. I think we're really at a tipping point, and it truly does make the smart city, the smart building, reality. It actually finally can be a reality.
I agree. But it also has, it enhances infrastructure, it enhances energy and utilities' ability to kind of modernize the grid. It allows connected vehicles to have a platform on which that they can have cellular V2X versus DSRC. There's all kinds of things that are going to be unlocked with the promise of 5G.
Yeah. We thought both of you were perfect for this this topic, not only in the Middleprise specifically, but more on the larger conversation that we've had today. New York City Transit Authority subway system, very much involved in that project. at Solid, and then Panasonic, of course, at Penn Station. So we just felt like, geographically anyway, it made sense to have both of you on this topic. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
And once again, from the NMG studio right here in Barcelona, Spain, we'd like to thank our speakers. And for more information on how to be on our program in 2018, you can contact us at thenetworkmediagroup.com. So long.